This is the story of Kevin and Pierre, two high school friends that managed to grow an online software business to 1 million annual recurring revenue. This was only after a few failures, and they share with us their learnings, which are really incredible. Let's begin. So, in 2006, Pierre and Kevin met in high school. They were high school friends and they were about to move to, let's say, the work life. They started to look into Y Combinator or startups and so on, and they learned that despite common knowledge, you don't really need a lot of money to start one. Anyway, they started to work for large companies in a regular job. The problem is, at some point, they got bored of it. Kevin, who was working in a small startup having fun, started not liking the work as much because the company was acquired by a larger one and his work became less fun. So he decided to move on and write a book about scrapping. Sometime later, they built their first product, Shop2List. Shop2List was a browser extension that allowed you to follow the price or track the price of products. So in online stores, you could track a product and check the price and the price updates. This is a common thing that we have nowadays. For example, first thing that comes to my mind is Keepa. I guess at that time it wasn't that popular. Anyway, the product began getting some traction. It had a lot of users and it looked like it worked. The thing is, they failed to monetize it. Users weren't willing to pay for this, and they mentioned that B2C, so business to customer, is hard. Acquiring new customers was hard and getting them to pay was even harder. Since they didn't find a scalable way of acquiring new customers and making the business profitable, they decided to sell the business and move on. Their next idea was to build the same thing but for B2B, so business to business. What they learned with Shop2List is that most of their customers were actually using their product for something else. The intention of the product was to allow users, final end users, to track the products that they were looking forward to buy. Instead, most of their customers were using their tool to track the prices of the competitors. So they said, okay, we learned that selling to the end customer is hard, and we want to still do a software as a service business. So why don't we try the same thing, but we focus on selling it to businesses? Everything looked nice and it was working. But the trouble started when they tried to charge the users for it. When they first ended the trial period or this free subscription thing, customers didn't want to pay for it. Basically, they had paying customers, but just a few, and it was hard to grow that number. They realized that they weren't experts in e-commerce, and that was hurting them when talking to customers. So, once again, they decided to move on to something else. They decided to move to an scrapping API, because during their previous work, like the browser plugin and the B2B version of it, they needed to do a lot of scrapping. And they learned that the available scrapping services weren't really good. They saw that they were incomplete in features or hard to use, or it was not clear who the owner was and they couldn't really rely on them. So they said, okay, why don't we do a scraping API? Basically what they have learned and what they have been using, but as a service for others. In June 2019, they launched their scrapping API. It went pretty well. They got customers very quick and they got paying customers. But they knew that the road was just beginning there. So the challenge now was growing that business. And what strategy did they follow to grow that business? They thought that if they created valuable content about scrapping, they might get the trust from potential customers and finally get conversions. And that's what they did. They wrote blog posts about, for example, web scrap without getting banned. And that post got more than 70,000 views. It was very popular and it became like some kind of reference in the web scrapping world. Writing content was hard. Creating quality content and getting it to rank high on Google and waiting for the results to come wasn't easy. So they tried some other ways of acquiring customers. At some point they realized that no, that was a mistake and they were wasting their time. So they went back to writing content and just spent a lot of hours doing it. The content creation paid off and they got more customers. Now they had a lot of customers, but they were having some trouble talking to them. Talking to users is very important because you need to understand your customer to be able to develop a solution that suits their problem. If you don't understand their problem and if you don't constantly talk to your customer, it's going to be very, very, very hard. So that's what they wanted. They wanted to talk to customers, but customers didn't want to talk to them. What did they come up with? Look, they said, we will give you 10,000 free API calls if you jump into a 15-minute call with us. Thanks to that, they interviewed 100 customers in less than 3 months and learned very valuable insights. In May 2020, they joined a very small VC or accelerator called Tiny Seed. With that, they got some investment that allowed them to continue working on the product and improving it. And then, 18 months after launching, they reached $10,000 per month in recurring revenue. But just 3 months later, they doubled this amount and reached 20K. For the next year, they just kept doing the things that worked, creating content and improving their product. And finally, 2.5 years after the launch, they reached $1 million in yearly recurring revenue. This is a huge accomplishment. Now they are continuing to grow in their business and to improve their product. I find this story very, very inspiring. How 2 teenagers just got together, started trying out things, didn't work, but learned something from all of these attempts. And then finally, they managed to get it done and to get it right. What do you think? When are you starting your software as a service product?